How can you really know where something was made, or even what it's made of? It's easy to tell with real-life things, but what about the content on our screens? Now more than ever, verified authenticity is critical, especially with the advent of AI. That's why a global community, including companies, organizations, and civic leaders, have come together in the Content Authenticity Initiative. The movement's goal is to promote universal adoption of content credentials, the open standard for content authenticity and provenance that can be attached to images, video and audio files, documents, and more. Think of it as a digital nutrition label. Camera and software companies are already including it in their products. You can choose to embed content credentials in your files and make it clear for people to review. You can interact with this icon to see the origin and edit history of the file. Content credentials can be stored in the cloud for added durability. The underlying technology implements the C2PA open standard, and the Content Authenticity Initiative is helping make it more widespread with free open source tools. On top of that, we're working with educators, policymakers, creators, and the industry to speed up the adoption of content transparency. Together, we can create a world with trust and transparency built into what we create, share, and see online.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this Content Authenticity Initiative event on proof of personhood, avatars, and content provenance technologies. My name is Henry Ajder. Some of you will have seen me on these sessions before. I'm the founder of Latent Space Advisory and advisor to the Content Authenticity Initiative. And we've got a brilliant session for you today with some really true experts from some really interesting different perspectives on this really interesting and incredibly contemporary issue of how avatars are changing the way that we see ourselves, we represent ourselves in the virtual world, and critically as well, how we can protect our likeness in this new age of avatars. So we have three brilliant panelists to join us today, all of who are going to be providing their wisdom and expertise from their different walks of life. We have Natalie Monbiot, who will be joining us first, who is the founder of Virtual Humans Economy and was a co-founder of Hour One, a pioneer in AI avatar generation. We have Kelsey Farish, who is an AI and media expert and lawyer. Kelsey has been really pioneering and trailblazing in terms of looking at the legal implications of avatars. And then we also have Erik Passoja, who is the co-chair of the New Technology Committee for SAG-AFTRA and an accomplished actor in his own right. So really interesting perspectives today, and on a really sticky issue where we can now have avatars generated of ourselves with one image, few seconds of audio. What does that mean for how we see ourselves? How do we protect ourselves? And what can provenance do to help with that process? So to begin today, we have Natalie Monbiot joining. Natalie, welcome. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So, Natalie, I understand and obviously know that you've been working in this space for a long, long time, and really were also a pioneer of the kind of the technological side of avatars. You know, you've been like myself, kind of on this train for some time, and have really seen the kind of the arc of the technology changing. And I understand you have some materials that you wanted to kind of share today with us, kind of give us a sense of how that journey has come along. But I guess to start, could you give our audience a bit of a sense of just quite how far avatar technology has come over the last, say, 6-7 years?
Yeah, so just a bit of background. Back in 2019, I was a co-founder of Hour One, which is one of the early AI avatar startups. And yeah, okay, just to address your question, like how far have they come? Well, we developed avatars in a completely different way back then. Like initially, you would actually have a person there, and you basically put a mask of another person on top, which, funnily enough, actually made for a better result than what was to ensue for, let's say, the next year or so on top of that. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay.
I can hear.
Okay, great. My screen just sort of flicked for
I
a
should
second.
say to the audience, we are using a new platform for this session, so that if there are any small technical issues, hopefully they are just small ones. Sorry, Natalie.
Sure. So basically, right at the beginning in 2019, we used a mask. So you'd actually have to have a real human being sort of posing behind an avatar in order to create this sort of video avatar, and that's what we were building at Hour One. And And then we're like, okay, wait, this is basically constricting the ability to actually create content featuring these human-like characters at scale if you have to actually have a human standing behind each of these masks every time. So the process changed, and we were able to just sort of generate them without any human intervention. And then then there was the ChatGPT moment, and all kinds of things sort of came about to heighten the realism and the speed of generation and the lifelikeliness and all of that. But if I may say, one of the things that I find most exciting and always did at Hour One, and what I'm still focused on today in my work, is that behind every one of our avatars was a real human being. Not necessarily, one that had to be standing there in order to, create this mask, but we actually did use people's likenesses, and we enabled people to license their likeness to Hour One and to our commercial customers. And they basically granted permission to have their likeness used, and in return, they were compensated for their appearances, which was something that for me sort of pointed to a future of work, and how a new future of work where humans and AI could collaborate in a way that was beneficial to humans. So we had some like everyday human beings who kind of moonlighted as an avatar, who found themselves speaking languages they didn't know for very large client projects like Berlitz. So, we had an architecture student who basically found herself teaching German as part of this project, and not making a living out of it, but making some money out of it. And that was for me kind of the seedling of like what the potential of this technology was if we did things the right way.
I think it's brilliant, Natty, to kind of at the top of this conversation, which maybe does sometimes tend to go a little bit more towards the scary or the kind of worrisome side of this technology, to really kind of set the scene as to, there are meaningful kind of commercially and creatively interesting applications that can really change the way that people communicate. And I love the fact that you emphasize there that, there's a human, a real person who's agreed, who's got licensing involved there. I mean, obviously the building blocks of, how we've worked with human to human talent before, carrying over into this new space. I'm curious, how does provenance fit into the way that you think about kind of building avatars? Is that something to do with kind of securing those agreements? Is it to do with trust and transparency to audiences, or is it all of these different pieces? I understand that at Hour One, you were one of the very first to really start actually playing with C2PA and some of the provenance standards with your avatar. So I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of your process and thought process around why you would introduce it in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, we were building exactly kind of as you say, especially back then in 2019, the only sort of incarnation of this technology, synthetic characters or synthetic media as it was known then, was deep fakes. And so we had a lot of work to do to kind of say, hey, big corporate client, you should, use this technology to help build your business and, essentially like build trust with your customers. So obviously we needed to enable them to trust us. And so there were a few things that we did in order to kind of make that happen. So first of all, trust between us and the people who are licensing their likeness to us, right? So that was consent, contractual arrangements, showing them, communicating to them that they, that their likeness wouldn't show up in certain types of content, and they would be compensated for their work, for their their new sort of like this new passive activity that this technology was suddenly enabling. And then another thing was around transparency on the user side. So we never ever so with a deep fake, which is designed to deceive, right? So it's like it's created to kind of to make it seem as though someone said something that they didn't, often for a nefarious intention. So it's the absolute opposite. We want to basically have people enjoy, trust, engage with the content, and we want that engagement with that piece of content to actually be successful for all the people, all the stakeholders concerned. And so a key component of that was basically making it very clear to the user that the content that they were looking at had actually been made with AI. And these days we're in a different landscape where we actually we can't trust that what we see wasn't made with AI. We need the sort of the tables have turned a little bit, but back then, this was quite a rare thing. And in the cases where it wasn't so rare, it was for nefarious reasons. So we always labeled our content with a little, at the time, this was like pre-content credentials back in 2019. So, how could we just label our content in a way that wasn't too intrusive, but that people would sort of get a sense that like, okay, I get a sense that this content was made using AI. Okay, good to know. And it was another trust cue. There are a couple more. I've got more to say on that in a sec. But basically, it wasn't very stable, right? It was basically like a little watermark that we just slapped on the top of the video because that's all that we could do. So as soon as content credentials, like following along very closely as to sort of the evolution of content credentials, and then when it was enabled for video, which was about a year and a half ago, I believe, I was dead set on Hour One being the first AI avatar company to actually implement that, because it was just so true to what we had always done. But that the solution at the time just that we had been using was just insufficient, just based on the technologies that were available then. So we can show a video in a minute about that just shows, like, it's kind of vintage at this point. I think it's from September 2024. We'll just show that in a second. But I think
it's the speed of change, Natalie. That is now the vintage. A year is a true vintage now.
Exactly. But overall, so it also helps clients, like big corporate clients like Berlitz, which for the people that don't know is, 150-year-old language school that wanted to digitally transform and actually used avatar technology in order to be able to scale its instructor-led content to the extent that it needed to, and it couldn't rely on actual human instructors to do that. They tried, and it was unfeasible. But then, so we wanted to sort of help enable content credentials, I would say, as an ingredient in helping to build that trust, and kind of just showed where we were coming from, I think, as a company, and what our values were. But I would say that the thing that really enabled trust in contexts like that for the user was that Berlitz, through by taking advantage of this technology, was actually able to scale its product to people that never had access to it before, both from a location standpoint. So, you basically had to be near a Berlitz school. And I was at school growing up in the UK. I would go to, like, I don't know, Nice and study at a Berlitz school. There's a lot of friction to do that, and it's not available to everyone. But suddenly this instructor-led learning delivered through a lifelike avatar was accessible to people all over the world, on demand, and at a more affordable price point. So I think that, that extra value that is being delivered goes a long way to trusting that content. And I think things like content credentials reinforce that. But I think it's, doing one thing alone doesn't do it. Like, you kind of need to do a combination of things that fit the context of what you're trying to do.
I love that point, Natalie. I think that's it. I think if you think that just by putting a content credential on a piece of content, that alone is the be all and end all of a process of building trust and transparency with an audience. Certainly, I don't think that's the case. There's a lot more that goes into the kind of the recipe, so to speak, but it's certainly a big part of it. I'd love to get that video to show people kind of how you incorporated it. And I should say as well to the audience, we have a Q&A. You can put your questions in the sidebar. I think it's on the right of your screen. You can put them in at any time, and we'll get to them at the end once we've spoken to all of our panelists. But it'd be great if we can get the video up so that we can see. And I can just tee up what we're going to see. So basically, it's content credentials embedded in the Hour One platform, so that any video generated in the platform, any avatar video, would actually have the content credentials embedded into it. And then through the partnership with LinkedIn, as the video showed up on LinkedIn, that content credentials label would show up, and you could hover over it and then actually see the ingredients of the content. It's awesome. And it's so important that it has
Excited to announce the integration of content credentials into our AI video platform, allowing viewers to see that our videos, like this one, originate from Hour One. Transparency has been a core value for us since 2019. With content credentials, we can authenticate the video as AI generated. Just look for the CR pin when videos appear on LinkedIn and a growing number of platforms. We are pleased to continue leading the charge on transparency and provenance of AI content, and to build trust in what we see on the web.
Fantastic. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for sharing that video. No, there are quite a few players in the avatar space, and I have not seen any put content credentials to work. So you have truly set the tone for trust and transparency in this space. I guess there's one last closing question for me, and just to kind of return to that theme again of avatars being used in kind of interesting, beneficial ways. Curious if you have any use cases outside of the one that you mentioned with Berlitz that maybe you sort of really like, that maybe people don't kind of typically think that avatars could be useful for. If you have any kind of favorite use cases of your avatars or just avatars in general out in the world making a difference.
Absolutely. So I moved on from hour one about just after content credentials got implemented, and then but I'm still deep in the space. I focus on what I call the virtual human economy, which is a new era in which we can create and then put our virtual selves to work on our behalf. So I'm still really inspired by this idea that we can, use this technology to communicate in new ways, and help us achieve what it is that we're, trying to achieve more of. And so I'll just jump into an example of a project I'm working on right now with a healthcare CEO. Who has, has had multiple exits. He's got a lot of wisdom to share and a lot of ambitions in the healthcare space and outside the healthcare space. And we've developed, under my new company, Virtual Human Economy, we've developed a multimodal AI twin for him, because I think that the physical aspect makes a lot of sense in terms of avatars. It makes a lot of sense sometimes when a visual experience is needed, but a lot of the time, the value that many of us have to offer, outside of, trading off, your likeness, if you're an actor or a personality, of course, that aspect of you is an asset that is very valuable. For many of us, it's really our wisdom, our expertise. And so what we've done is we've built this multimodal platform where you can go in and engage with the CEO in both text, in voice chat, and as an avatar, and so that you kind of like have the modality at your fingertips that makes the most sense. And the idea is to be able to kind of engage with this wisdom in ways that weren't possible before. And again, it's that thing about accessibility. And we've got lots of interesting things in the pipeline there that are computer vision enabled. So getting feedback on a document or an email, if you're in his, an employee of his company, so that, you can actually get his actual feedback on a personalized level at scale. So you would never normally necessarily get access to him at all, but now everybody can get access to his expertise on this kind of one-to-one basis.
It's super cool to have that kind of much more accessible entry point. And as you said, you can still get to the person at the end of the pipeline if, indeed that's the appropriate pathway. But being able to democratize the access, it's definitely a cool use case, and one that I love in education as well, personally. I think it's really awesome with avatars. Natalie, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll have some questions coming in for you later, no doubt, in the Q&A. But yeah, really appreciate you sharing your experiences and wisdom on all things avatars. Thank you. So we now have joining us Kelsey Farish. Kelsey is, as mentioned, a pretty pioneering AI and media lawyer. She was very much leading on practice around these topics at DAC Beechcroft, and now runs her own practice, advising a whole range of interesting people. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us.
You are so welcome. It's really kind of funny, I think, sometimes, because when people say that, like, I'm an AI lawyer, it's like, I'm not an AI lawyer. I'm not like some law tech, kind of thing, but, it happens.
Or you're not an AI generated lawyer, and this is what we're about right now.
It's funny because, yeah, I was just going to say, it's like people would always like make jokes when they would have me on Zoom calls, because it was like during COVID, right, where this really started picking up, and people would be like, oh, are you a deep fake? And I'm like, turn to the right or the left. That's a good way of knowing. Back then it was, anyway.
Yeah, it's a line that I hear a lot as well. I think if I had a pound coin or a dollar for every time someone made that joke, I'd be a much richer man. But Kelsey, you really have been kind of observing this, particularly from that legal perspective, really since the early days. I remember our conversations going back years on this topic, and like with Natalie, you've seen that change. And I guess you've maybe been seeing changes from, obviously you've been following the technological changes, but I'm sure you've also been seeing some of the legal changes quite particularly in terms of attitudes, how legislation's been changing. So I know you had some things you maybe wanted to present and share, but just
Yeah,
to
I
start,
do.
yeah,
I do.
would love to hear. Yeah.
Cool. So I thought of you earlier today, Henry, actually, because I had someone, a journalist from a well-known organization, call and ask if I knew what government ministers were saying about how to protect actors when it comes to AI. And I was like cracking my knuckles. I'm like, oh, where should we begin? Look, so I've I've been doing this since 2019, and the reason why I chose to specialize in AI, I didn't really have a choice. I'm just obsessed with good films and good TV, and I knew when deepfakes first hit the scene that it was going to pose some significant trouble for actors. So, one of the most popular deepfakes to arise in the world of media and entertainment, I suppose you could say, was with regard to Scarlett Johansson and other female actors who were being deepfaked into non-consensual sexual imagery without their consent. And she gave this amazing interview with the Washington Post, saying that there was nothing that anyone could do to stop this practice, right? And as a junior lawyer at the time, I was like, oh, she just needs someone to sit down and really think this through. So I tried. Obviously, the first thing that lawyers and academics around the world thought to do, which makes total sense, is to criminalize intimate image-based abuse, and this has to do with protecting someone's reputation and their privacy, and of course their dignity in the era of Me Too. But the question that I actually had was, well, right, we can criminalize sexual deepfakes, but what's going to stop the streamers or the production companies of this world from making non-sexual deepfakes? Because we know that there are ways that people can be, misappropriated or lose out on potential income streams, etc., if the deepfake is not sexual. So now we refer to these as, digital replicas or human clones or virtual twins and so on. And so that's really my specialism. After working in fancy corporate law firms here in London, I decided to start my own practice. And today I only work with creatives and performers. And it's sadly not Scarlett. She's got a group of really good lawyers already. But there are a lot of times people will talk about things like, the technological safeguards that the CIA and the CAI and others will do. And of course, good industry practice is really important. But while we wait for regulations to hit, there's a lot of really cool things that we can do with contracts. It's complicated though, right? Because we have to think about things from three different perspectives. This is my own framework. It's not set in stone. It's not gospel, but I think it sets the scene nicely for a legal conversation. We meaning lawmakers and lawyers, we're trying to define reality, right? And this is where authenticity and provenance and evidence and these sorts of things are really, really important because they tell the viewer or the audience, can I believe what I'm seeing? But we have to do that in a way that's flexibly and doesn't stifle or freeze or chill creativity and expression. And then we also have to consider the people who are viewed. So our actors, our performers, and everyday people, the avatars, for example. And we need to find ways that give them control and consent mechanisms over their likeness, as well as preserving their reputation and their dignity. And I would put pay in that under dignity. I think fairly paying talent is a great signal of how to respect their dignity, right? And then of course balancing power, making sure that the big studios and tech platforms of this world are not running away with all of our data and influence and so on. So I had the absolute pleasure earlier this year to represent the UK-based voice actor who is now his voice is now on one of the world's most popular social media platforms, tech companies / auto manufacturers. It got picked up in the news, and it was a really interesting matter, and it was such a privilege to represent him, not just because we had to deal with platform issues like ecosystem play and data harvesting and deal with the contracts and GDPR and all the rest of it, but because I had the opportunity, really the privilege, to talk to him about what was important for him. And this, I think, works really well with what Natalie was saying too, because my client's main concerns, right, were, his cash, livelihood, income streams, protecting his dignity, confidentiality as well, certain controversies and issues related to that particular social media platform. And then because we didn't have a lot of the regulations in place, and because he's non-union, right? He wasn't a member of SAG-AFTRA, and Equity, which is the actors union here in the UK, isn't as far along as I would otherwise hope them to be. We got to do some really cool stuff with the contract and the negotiation. Cool stuff, she says, a lawyer. For example, going into California statute and copying and pasting things out of the California Civil Code that gives him and his family some rights there that he wouldn't have had otherwise here in the UK. Things like making sure definitions were really, really tight. When we say things like, his voice can be used in the ecosystem, what do we mean by that? Do we mean the car, the spaceship, whatever else comes out of that particular man's head? All of these things. It was a really interesting thing. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show, is that it's not just what the law says, it's what we can do with the law and how we can think creatively about protecting talent and performers, the people behind the avatars.
Wow, Kelsey, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. I feel much better grounded in this conversation. So hopefully it means I can ask even better questions. You can be the judge. Yeah, I love that you grounded it for us there as well in a case that you've actually worked on, because I think there are an increasing number of these cases compared to there were a few years ago. And I know there have been some notable ones with, I think there was the voice performer whose kind of voice was stolen by a Scottish railway company.
That's
I think
right.
that was one case quite recently. Yeah, we had obviously Bev, I think it was Bev Standing, the TikTok voice.
Now I'm just gonna jump right in here. It's interesting, and you are not wrong when you say her voice was stolen. But when we think about what her original voice contract would have said, it probably would have said something along the lines of, by agreeing to take this voiceover work, I hereby allow you, the rights holder, the production company, whatever, Scottish Rail, to use my voice in any way you want to in the future. That drafting needs to be broad in order to allow the production company and the studios to do the things they need to do with the likeness or the voice. But what's happening now is that drafting, those clauses, haven't caught up to the reality, which is we can now do really crazy things with someone's likeness that we couldn't before. So it's not about saying, you can never, ever, ever use my voice, or you can't colorize me, or do something in post-production when it comes to ADR or automated dialogue replacement. It's about making sure we're telling our performers and we're telling people, hey, I might, smooth out some wrinkles using some AI tool in Adobe or otherwise. Would I be cool with that? Yeah, probably. I mean, definitely sign me up. But no, we're not going to lighten your skin. We're not going to remove, your cochlear implant or something like that. It's about that ties back to dignity.
So this is a really interesting, I guess, trade-off challenge that I imagine might be the case. You tell me again if I'm wrong, which is, trying to get that balance between possible permutations, alterations of avatars of synthetic versions of yourself or edited versions of oneself, and, contracts which aren't just completely bloated and processes that don't go on forever and ever. How do you think about getting that balance right when you're representing talent or creatives? Curious what your process is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of consider myself to be a lawyer for people who hate lawyers. And one of the things that I really, really hate is this idea that legal contracts, which to me are like almost sacred, right? Especially talent contracts, they don't need to be overcomplicated. So one of the things I was really concerned about for my actor client was that I wanted him to have visibility on what this tech company was going to be doing with his voice in the future. I spoke to their in-house counsel and he said, yeah, we'll put in like 9-10 paragraphs of audit rights and transparency obligations, and your client will fill out a form and there'll be a spreadsheet and quarterly reportings. And I said, Evan, please, that's bullshit. I just want my client to have a phone number and the name of a real person who works at the company that he can text anytime, day or night, and just say, hey, look, I've got a quick question. Are you guys planning on using my voice in A, B, and C way? Or what will you be doing next month? I saw this thing on Tech Radar about this crazy new platform. Is my voice going to be integrated? It's not that difficult, people. One clear sentence, it can save you a lot of headaches and heartbreaks down the line.
Okay, there we go. It's that simple and easy.
It can be. It depends on your negotiating position.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, it's good to get that kind of cutting through the noise, though. And I think there's such a noisy space, and I imagine a lot of actors and talent in particular do find it quite overwhelming, and need help guiding through this kind of landscape. I guess my final question for you today, Kelsey, before we get to the audience Q&A after Erik, is kind of where do you see things going? Do you think that we need dramatic changes in legislation to better protect talent? I remember for my documentary with the BBC, I interviewed you for that documentary, and we spoke about a really famous case of impersonation that happened, I think it was 30, 40 years ago. And so, is it a case that those kinds of laws still kind of hold their own, or is it the case that you see there being a much more need for better protections coming through true legislation for talent?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of different questions in there, but I would say that we want to have some sort of minimum safeguards. And for me, it's not about whether, AI is good or bad in a particular context. It's about empowering individuals to make the choices that work for them. So in the case of my actor, for example, I could have talked to him all day. In fact, I had many, many hours of conversations about why he should not sign this deal. But because we knew what was going on behind the curtain, he felt empowered enough to make a decision that worked for him. Not everyone has the privilege to hire a lawyer, right? And so because of that, we do need safeguards in place, whether that's legislation written by people who don't know the media and entertainment industry. I'm not sure. Remember that a lot of our lawmakers, they have to balance, they want the tech companies to innovate. They want the production companies to make good films. They want to help performers, yes, but it's a balancing act. So what I'm really excited and hopefully hope to see, in my lifetime, is a way to make the legal education more accessible. And one of the ways that we do that is by allowing people to, come in for legal clinics, or, making sure that their contracts or that the unions are able to implement good drafting in those documents. It's not about taking a sledgehammer to the legal system. It's about giving people the very nuanced tools that they need and to feel good. Like, you can ask for what you want. You might not get it, but you do have the power to at least ask for it. And if someone doesn't want to give you an answer, that's sometimes a red flag.
Okay, I like this message of empowerment, and certainly, obviously, in the UK context right now, with the Make It Fair campaign around data and copyright, that kind of tension for government is really clear right now between kind of actors and attracting talent. Attracting tech platforms. So yeah, I love that point to close on for now, Kelsey. Thank you so much for again sharing your wisdom and laying things out so neatly. I need to learn from your skills on PowerPoint and slides. They look really good.
Canva, it's Canva.
Oh, it's
I'll
Canva.
charge you less than my hourly rate to give you a master class.
Okay, I'll hold you to it, Kelsey. Thank you. Okay, so for our last speaker today, we're really lucky to be joined by Erik Passoja. And Erik, it's really great to have you with us today because to have your perspective after what we just discussed with Kelsey around talent, to be able to speak to someone who is the talent and is someone who's an accomplished actor, but is also deeply engaged with these big questions and helping your colleagues in the space understand, navigate it. It's really brilliant to have you with us. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. I just want to first say that as a SAG-AFTRA member, the only SAG-AFTRA member who can represent our union is our president, Sean Astin. Yay, Sean, congratulations. But I do speak in support of our 170,000 members, and I am the co-chair of the LA New Technology Committee at SAG-AFTRA. And I love the things that have been brought up so far. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now, so
Sure.
you really can see where we're going with this. Are we going to split me? There we go. Hi. So just to show you where I'm coming from, I'm recurring actually as the deputy director of the FBI on NCIS. I just did voices for How to Train Your Dragon. I'm a member of the Actors Studio for 25 years. Acting is my passion, and I'm also a nerd. And in 2014, I did Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. They dotted me up. It was on the set where they originally shot Avatar. There are 52 cameras on the ceiling. I worked with Kevin Spacey. No, he didn't hit on me. And I was his henchman, his Belgian geneticist. And we were in the interstitials of a very violent game. And 6 months later, when the game came out, a friend called and said, "Hey, Erik, my son just shot you." I said, "What?" Turns out Activision had taken my face, put it on a PvP player without my consent, and you could play me for $30 a month running around shooting at your children. And if you knew me, that's not okay with me. They didn't ask my consent, and they didn't pay me a penny more than my session fee, and they made over $1 billion off the game. So note that we performers are the canaries in the coal mine of digital identity. You take away a carpenter's voice, they can still build. You take away a voice actor's voice, they'll never work again. And I realized that when we went on strike in 2023, I thought of that 22-year-old with a voice like Janice or Whitney, who shouldn't have it stolen from her for $50,000. And that would be theft because she should be making Adele money, but it might seem like a lot of money at the time. So I became co-chair of the LA New Technology Committee. We put out 30 proposals in our last term, 10 of them on AI. I'm part of the Government Affairs and Public Policy Committee. Went to Sacramento twice to testify, most recently for AB 853, which we'll discuss. I have 9 patents specifically dealing with digital identity. Just finished the National Science Foundation I-Corps, and my company is ProofGen. Now, you have to understand, when I say we're the canaries in the coal mine, I'm going to take you down a little rabbit hole, because this goes for everyone. If your doctor calls you to double up on your medication, but it's not your doctor, if you call your school to pick up your kids and your school releases them, but it's not you. Just so you know, our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was deepfake making calls to foreign emissaries. White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, Amy Klobuchar, AOC. President Biden was deepfaked in a New Hampshire robocall last January, and it took him 32 days to catch the culprit, which at scale won't work, because when we have agentic AI potentially run by a foreign enemy, it's going to be like writing a jaywalking ticket in a parade. So this is a serious conversation that goes far beyond our humble union. And note that the FBI in December 2024 came out with a PSA saying that generative artificial intelligence has become such a scam problem that families are being fooled into thinking that it's their children calling. If a mother can't recognize her child, note that the Turing test has been passed. CSAM, child pornography, is a big problem. Even on the executive level, there are people who have actually deepfaked CTOs and CIOs and scammed $25 million from a Hong Kong company, from Arup. And also note that last December, the House AI Task Force, which unfortunately is no more, reported that we need legislation urgently to address the speed and scale of the production and dissemination of digital replicas, which some people may call avatars, and we'll get into that conversation. And furthermore, they said that there is no single currently optimal technical solution to content authentication. You can't actually authenticate whether it's real or whether it's AI. I beg to differ, which is good news. And note, there have been bills. California has led. AB 2602 deals with your digital replica is yours. SB 942 is the first AI Transparency Act that kicks in on August 2nd. Not coincidentally with the EU laws, that deals with latent disclosures and watermarking to actually, if you have a front-facing LLM with over 1 million monthly users, you have to label. And finally, the bill that just passed, that also kicks in on the same day, is the second part of that Transparency Act, AB 853, which I testified for, which is in-device watermarking in your camera and on mic. For performers, this is huge. But note that point of capture is absolutely vital. When light hits a lens, when a voice hits a microphone, that is the only way to confirm whether it's real or not. As soon as it goes into a camera, by the way, if you do red eye fix, that's AI immediately. And in court, you're going to have to declare that with content credentials. Yes, original image, red eye, and unless the case is about red eye, you're fine. So on the right, we have the federal laws, which are still in progress, the No Fakes Act, the Copied Act. And I just want everyone to know, one single bill has passed U.S. Congress this year. That's the Take It Down Act. That's anti-pornography, which was championed by Ted Cruz, and Melania Trump practically stood on top of it. No other AI bills have passed federal Congress this year or been seriously discussed, and yet they're attempting a moratorium on all state bills. We can talk about that in a minute. Just note that new legislation is needed to even enforce the bills here. The key insight of this is we're not going to stop the creation of deepfakes, but we can stop them from reaching you, like a spam filter. We can filter out 99.9% of them, and the next 0.1% of them gets routed to law enforcement. 3 bills that I've written for state and federal that really address the solutions is 1, the definition of informed consent for your digital replica. for your avatar. We have to define that. We did it for medical, and we've done it for education, for children, and for pop-ups. You'll notice your cookies, you're getting a lot of pop-ups because laws kicked in. Second, this is where content authenticity comes from, data provenance. What do we actually write on our media, and how do we format it, and how do we make it, as per SB 942, extraordinarily difficult to remove? And as far as we know, I know that jump headers and watermarks are extremely brittle. We need next gen. And finally, we need every system that streams media to actually authenticate consent and provenance. So here's how we enforce it technically. First of all, once we've defined informed consent, Apple can clearly say, if I share my picture with you, I can set preferences to how you share it and watermark straight out of camera. Apple can protect 1 billion people with a single iOS update. On the right that I created for our union that our committee has passed, it's a consent matrix. If you hire an actor, you should answer 6 basic questions. Are you going to use the person's face, voice, movement, what? What are you going to use it for? I'm going to just make this up. We're going to use Erik as a tour guide for the Louvre. What's his name going to be? Jacques. Great. Are you going to use him in different languages? Yes. How many different languages? Is he going to represent a person? Yes, Jacques. Are there going to be derivative works? Is there going to be a Jacques commercial? Is there going to be a Jacques plush toy using my voice at the gift shop? Will I be naked? It's in our collective bargaining agreements, but say it again. And finally, what are the usage terms and revocation rights for the use of that digital replica? Just say what you're going to do. No clear and conspicuous consent, no reasonably specific consent, because ASI is going to make mincemeat of that. How are you going to use it with informed consent? In terms of provenance, we created the SAG-AFTRA digital identity schema, which basically says, if you put us on camera, what info would we like written on our media? Well, how about our SAG-AFTRA name, ID, project name? Kelsey brought this up. Who's the producer? What's the venue, production company, time, date, GPS coordinates? And put the DGA, WGA, and IATSE numbers on it too, because they deserve residuals. You can't just use it. And so I joined C2PA. I'm a member of COG, and we've had a real deep discussion about what to use on provenance on a remote manifest to refer to. We looked at movie labs. We looked at Dublin Core. We looked at stuff for the recording industry, the DDEX, and the conversation is really down to what you put in a manifest, and we're working hard on that. And finally, if you're Netflix, if you're YouTube, if you're an Apple box, if you're a 3D game engine, you actually should check for consent, and you should check for provenance. Then whether you put it on a front-facing server like Disney might, or AWS if you're brave, or on blockchain, you can take a permanent, immutable record of when it was attempted to be streamed. And if it authenticates, great. If it doesn't, it either gets arbitrated once 100,000 come into our union, and it only happens once because it'll be in variety, or if it's the president of the United States, the FBI should kick the person's door down in 10 minutes. We don't have that yet. So thank you for letting me share, and let's all talk about it.
Wow, Erik, that was quite a tour, and you've revealed yourself as quite a polymath as well, with all of the different hats that you wear in your professional life. I'm very impressed. That was super insightful, and interesting to know that, yes, I probably also have shot you several times in Advanced Warfare when I was a teenager. That's a fun revelation there for me. I
was ripped. See the size of my arms? That wasn't bad, right?
I was going to say, they glowed you up a bit there, Erik. But I guess one of the questions that immediately comes to mind to me is, you painted such a vivid picture here of the kinds of things that you and your colleagues within the union would like to see, and clearly the need for at point of capture, provenance in device, and also the key information you need, again, to what Kelsey was saying, to kind of make informed decisions, to be able to specify the use of your likeness in certain ways. Why, aside from the government, what are some of the blockers that you think are coming? I mean, for example, are the studios on board with this? Is this something that you see the lifespan of digital media? Where is the friction forming most right now when it comes to getting this actually put in place in your industry?
A nuclear bomb here. All right, here's where we are. If you take the combined valuation of Hollywood right now, Netflix, Disney, NBC, et cetera. The valuation is $1.02 trillion. Microsoft is at $3.7 trillion. 9 of the top 10 valuated companies in the world are the tech companies. Apple, Microsoft, Meta, Tesla. Number 6 is Saudi Aramco Oil, and number 11 is Warren Buffett. The combined value is $25 trillion. There are hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into lobbying right now, and the LLMs, they stole everything, whether it's copyright, whether it's digital identity. And the fact is, legislation has been stalled because people are getting paid off. And if you are getting paid off by lobbying money, you're selling out humanity. So the conversation is really with the tech companies, because Hollywood, as Scarlett Johansson said, has a 1,000-foot wave above it, and that's the tech companies. Now note, right now, I can break down a script in 2 minutes, not 4 days with producers in the room going, oh, what are the props we're going to use? What are the locations? 2 minutes. I can dub you in 120 languages and move your lips with software. If I want B-roll, let's say a Mercedes S-Class going down an autumn highway in the Adirondacks, Route 87, fall colors, I don't have to spend $50,000 to send a B team. I go to Sora and it's done. So here's my question. What do we need studios for? You can make a movie for 1/10 the price. And the fact is, I went to see one battle after another. By the way, Sean Penn gave the performance of a lifetime and a lifetime of performances. It was me, my son, opening weekend, #1 box office draw, 20 other people in the audience. I am not worried about the studios. The studios might be worried about the tech companies. We and the studios can actually team up now. And this is what I mean. There's a new bill that just got signed called AB 683. That gives me the right to do a 48-hour cease and desist takedown of any illicit use of my digital replica. Now note, I'm opt-in. Sora just announced that the studios are opt-out. So I imagine 100 people at Warner Brothers trying to type in every Warner Brothers property in the world. But if I type gray and white bunny standing up eating a carrot 50s cartoon into Midjourney, I'm getting Bugs Bunny. So even if I pull out their IP name, the IP is still going to be in there. So the point is, I can do a 48-hour takedown of studios' IP that's been illicitly used. They're blocked by Section 230, meaning they have to win a case to get it pulled down. So it's time we do a dogpile lawsuit, performers, DGA, WGA, IATSE, and the film companies or the media companies to really establish not only what our rights are, but what our property is.
Mm. Beautifully put, Erik. As I say, I can tell you act. You've got a very powerful way of delivering your points. You're convincing me. I didn't need much convincing, but I'm even more convinced. We've just got a couple of minutes before we're going to go to Q&A. We've got some great questions coming in. I guess that one question for me to you is, do you, and answer as free as you like, but do you see anything positive about this new wave of AI? I mean, you've talked for the filmmakers and for actors and for talent. I mean, you've talked there about a line that I often use when I speak to ministers and people is about having the power of a Hollywood studio and the smartphone in your pocket or on the laptop on your desk in terms of that democratizing effect of creative possibility. But are there any kind of situations or use cases that you're like, this is really cool and I really like this idea? Or do you see this as more of just kind of a broad threat on the whole?
I have been waiting for AI ever since I was a kid. I've used Lisp as a kid. I read The Age of Spiritual Machines by Ray Kurzweil. The singularity is near. The singularity is nearer. I love movies about AI. And quite frankly, this is very exciting for me. It just needs to be done ethically. When I say ethically, be ethical. If it's about the money, just understand that if there's no transparency for copyright, by the way, we're doing a march on December 8th, March the number 2 testify.com in support of copyright. If you cannot actually be transparent about copyright, you're not going to be transparent about AI safety. And that is a big conversation that goes beyond this. But the point being, I wrote 3 bills. I have a prosodic watermarking that may survive 11 labs. We're dealing with AI survival watermarking. I have an entire C2PA combination engine through ProofGen, and I did that all with the help of AI. I could not have done that alone without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, sorry, Kelsey, on lawyers and everything else. I replaced lawyers with AI. It made life a little more accessible to me. And quite frankly, I nerd out. It's a lot of fun. And yet, we have to be very careful about doing the right thing, because we possibly could implode employment. And if we're gonna do that, then we need to create some kind of basic income, or quite frankly, as we know, when everybody's out of work, out come the guillotines. I'm just saying, if people don't have work, what are they going to do? It's happened over and over in history.
Well, I mean, as we close our part of this conversation, Erik, we open up several cans of interesting words.
I know, here we are. Don't freak out, everyone. Everything's going to be okay.
Well, Erik, thank you so much for, as I said, that real kind of tour of the space and your different hats that you wear and the different perspectives they bring, and, you know, that kind of affirmative view of how we can go forward. I think that's really valuable in this space, to have that kind of rallying cry that there is a better way forward, and how provenance and these technologies can play into it. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I think we're now going to bring back Kelsey and Natalie for Q&A. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a couple of questions coming in here, which is great. So we'll start with this one from Tyler Harden. Thank you for the question here, Tyler. Which is, have you seen that organic avatar sources or humans prefer one-off compensation or ongoing royalties based on use, similar to song licensing? How does copyright law apply to these creations? Who owns the avatars, derivative works, etc.? It's an interesting one. Kind of almost makes me think of like an annuity with like a pension or something. Kind of like, are you going to go for the one-off? How long do you think you got, basically? I guess, Kelsey, it makes sense to start with the lawyer here on this one.
And I'm going to give the lawyer's answer, which is, it depends. I cannot, and not just because, you know, it's legal advice or whatever, I can't say without looking at the contract, without knowing the jurisdiction, without knowing what the T's and C's of the particular tool are, or how much human creativity has gone into it. I can't say who owns what, when, why, how. And likewise, it's really, really difficult to say, should you take a one-off payment or should you get some sort of, you know, royalty, right? Like, there's a lot to be said for the fact that, like, just look at the music industry. We used to buy vinyl or CDs, and you bought it once and you'd listen to it however much you wanted, and then streaming, and then pay per stream. I mean, the whole business model has evolved, but what I'm seeing now is actually a fragmentation. So some people go for one-off, you know, pay buyout rates or whatever. Other people like license fees. It really just depends. I'm seeing it all in practice.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, Erik, if you've been seeing similar things, or yeah.
I would say this: if we have to authenticate every stream, and I think we do, or there's going to be CSAM and everything else, that gives us the opportunity to monetize on an interaction in an interactive basis. And by the way, the business model, especially when the glasses come out, is going to be interaction. But no, if you see me, if you hear me, give me a little cha-ching. It works for Spotify. It works for Apple Music. They got to work out better deals for performers. But if I authenticate, cha-ching, it's the only fair way to do it. That means that if your show sucks and no one sees it, you don't have to keep paying me. But if you start making a lot of money, give me a tiny percentage of that, such that I can make a living from the $3 billion you just made. That's the only right way to do it. And yes, people are going to try buyouts until the stars say no. I want to get points on this. And points have always been how many people put their butts in seats.
Yeah, Natalie, curious what your approach was on this. Or what you think the model should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree in kind of this sort of like performance-based or values-based approach. So is your voice or is your likeness in demand? And, you know, if it's in demand, then you should get paid more for that. And I also think that if there are ways, and I'm kind of thinking about kind of like more everyday people, and I'm thinking about the 11 Labs current model. I don't know if anyone here has tried it, but it's, you know, payouts, which I've been doing since it began. And it's actually great. It's like every month I get some sort of like, what is this? And it's like, oh, how nice. A few extra $100 from 11 Labs and my voice being used on various projects. And I realized, like, if I change the parameters, I can try to make more money with my voice. So I can allow my voice to be used for a year, right? I actually haven't gone that far. I'm allowing it to be used for 6 months at a time now. And so customers are more likely to commit to your voice, to use, they feel like they can commit they can basically rely on having the same voice for their projects. So they're willing to pay more. So you basically have these levers, you're in control, and you can see the value of your kind of likeness, your assets sort of in real time. And it's something that you can opt in or opt out of, and you can kind of play around with and have a certain amount of control over. So I think that's a really good model.
I love this kind of idea that the control is part of it. It's not just about the provenance side of things in terms of that data, but it's also being able to have your kind of like almost personal dashboard about your own likeness and how that's being used, and being able to get that sense of oversight over what is actually happening, not the kind of black box that spits out a few dollars for you here and there. Interesting. I mean, I'd like to stay with you actually, Natalie, for this question from Joe, where he asks, are we past the uncanny valley on avatars in terms of user experience? And even if that's the case, is there something deeper we can learn about the general aversion people have when they learn they've been fooled by AI content?
On the first part, we passed the uncanny valley when it comes to user experience. So I think it depends on how you define user experience. I think when it comes to video, AI-generated video that's played back, like on Sora, I mean, I think in many cases we really have passed the uncanny valley. I think where we certainly have not passed the uncanny valley is in live interactive avatar video. I think we're still quite a long way from that happening. I think there need to be new breakthroughs for that to actually be really effective. So I think that, but then there's other ways of having an avatar or digital likeness. And I think that with voice, live interaction with voice is actually very minimal lag right now. And voice carries so much of your personality. I think it's a great way, if what you're trying to do is, to convince people or make people, not convince people, make people feel that they actually are having a conversation with an extended version of yourself. I think voice is a really good option. That last question, can you just repeat how that was phrased, the last part of the question?
Yeah, of course. He said, even if it is the case that we pass that uncanny valley when it comes to user experience, is there something deeper we can learn about the general aversion people have when they learn they've been fooled by AI content? So I guess it's a question about, even if it's past the uncanny valley, does the very inherent nature that it's AI, that it's kind of that deceptive experience, even when I have this sometimes. I'll be listening to something or I'll be watching something which I know is AI generated, but there's part of my kind of brain that is sort of like fighting to treat it as real, even though I know it's not. So I'm kind of caught in this double think kind of moment.
I think nobody likes feeling fooled, AI or not, right? So I think everything that we can do up front to prepare people for what it is that they're going to see or what it is that they are seeing and why they're seeing it that way. I think that a lot of emphasis has to be on that. I think people by default are going to be sort of thinking like, am I being fooled? Is kind of like a default mode that people approach, content on the web these days. So it's like, okay, so what is it that I'm looking at? And providing the cues to help people understand what they're looking at, whether or not the intent is to fool them or not. They won't feel fooled if there is a certain level of transparency. And I think that's where content credentials is a great tool in that toolkit.
Yeah, I would agree. Natalie. I'm just conscious of time, and I just want to do two very quick rapid fire questions. One for Kelsey, one for Erik before we wrap up. This one, and sorry if this is unfair given the nature of the questions, they're interesting. One from Sol here is, I think it's really interesting for you, Kelsey, which is it possible to properly quantify someone's likeness or identity? If not, is it truly possible to appropriately compensate someone for their likeness? Quite a philosophical question, but I don't know if that's something you've ever kind of come across. Is like, how do you draw percentage likeness? I mean, yeah. Or is it's a tricky one?
Well, it's a tricky one, but it's also a really lovely one, because from an English law and indeed a US perspective, where I'm originally from, however the heck you want. If you want to say that your likeness is a catchphrase, do you remember Paris Hilton trying to trademark, that's hot? I mean, maybe a slogan or a photograph or someone's name or the particular timbre of their voice. Like, you can do it however you want, as long as you can clearly write it down and capture it. I think that's where it goes. But yeah, just however you want, really. It depends.
And the market will value it for you and determine for you whether or not correctly.
That's right. Just like any sort of like luxury good. And again, it goes back to bargaining power as well, which is why it's good to have a good lawyer and not just ChatGPT, because sometimes the lawyers
I knew Erik saying that
to leverage certain things. Yeah. That's all right.
Just a quick 30 seconds from you, Erik. We have a question here from Vishar, sorry, who asked whether you were saying that it's become impossible to tell real from synthetic content, and what reliable technologies exist to tell apart real from synthetic. And it's a good job for Vishar that we're on a call talking about C2PA and content credentials and the like. But yeah, curious if you wanted to respond.
Well, funny you say that. I was on a call with Dean Ball recently, who is the author of Trump's AI action plan, and they have reserved all digital identity protection to NIST, which is forensic. Basically, after the bomb has gone off in the building, you try to catch the person. The reality is, in a brief encounter, for example, customer experience, I heard Poly AI has something for DoorDash where the DoorDash person can't find someone and AI talks to them. It's kind of hard to tell the difference. But as an actor, quite frankly, I don't think an AI is going to be able to do the fireplace scene in Extremities like I am. I'm bound up. They're pouring bleach on my face. She's poking me with a stick. That's survival. So that really you can distinguish between Tilly Norwood, who can go, I like Snickers, and that's about it, to a person who's actually living and breathing. But it all, again, like my compatriots have said, it depends on the situation. Parents are being fooled. That's that. I mean, billions of dollars a year of leakage with insurance photo fraud. And by the way, photos are the same as digital identity. It's the same conversation.
For sure. No, I agree. I think the evidence speaks for itself on this front, in terms of how people are reacting, behaving.
And by the way, Dean Ball said, I think people are more discerning than
that. I like his faith in humanity. That's ever the optimist. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know about you, this has been brilliant. I mean, so much information shared and so much wisdom from different perspectives. Yeah, I'm really, really grateful to all of you, Natalie, Kelsey, and Erik. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope everyone here can join us for the next one. And just 3 points for you here at the end. If you're not a member yet, please do consider joining the Content Authenticity Initiative to stay up to date with the latest developments in the content provenance ecosystem that we've been talking about today. You can find that at content.authenticity.org/membership. And if you're in the process of building your implementation, a little bit like Natalie was when building content credentials in place with Hour One, join the CAI Content Authenticity Initiative Discord to connect with some of the other people doing so. There's some really great support over there for questions and access to some educational resources. And then lastly, the CAI is building a marketplace of C2PA-enabled products and services. So if you're a CAI member and your implementation is live and out there in the world, you can submit it to get it actually featured and shown off all the cool things you're working on. So with that, thank you again to Natalie, Kelsey, and Erik for joining us, and to all of you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you for the next one. Thanks so much, everyone.